Welcome everyone to our Tuesday night My Self-Reliance Zoom chat tonight on the back of the news that we've just heard, the new variant that's coming to plague a city near you. We need to review and recap on some of our self-reliance topics that we've talked about to make sure that everyone is up to date with what you're doing to prepare for the future. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And, okay. So 10 things you should do now to prepare for survival. So, you know, these are sorts of things that we need to start to make sure that we have in our kits, and really because the next set of lockdowns are going to be harsher than the last set, and we know how bad the last set were. And it may not even be the lockdowns that's the worst part. It may be, and I don't want to start talking about all of the stuff that we're seeing coming through in terms of jabs and in terms of mandatory camps and job losses and all the things that we're having to deal with. All about those things. So let's just get on and talk about what we need to do to make sure that we separate ourselves from the system so that we can survive no matter what. And this is real survival, because not only are what's on our doorstep from government pending doom is also weather. We're going to have to deal with all kinds of weather experiences, whether it's floods or fires okay, so we are going to cover a few different things tonight. So let's jump into it. Number one for your survival is water. Now, they have told us if you're living in Sydney area, anywhere near the Hawkesbury, anywhere near Windsor, that the flood this year, you can count on it being worse than last year. And the reason is because the Warragamba Dam is already full, and it will take no time at all to overflow. And
Nancy's in it. Nancy's in it.
I might just get everyone to mute the background. That's all right. Cool. And so you don't drink flood waters, even after they recede. Any water that's surrounded by water, but it's going to be detrimental to your health if you are going to drink it. So do not drink flood water. Also, what's really dangerous around flooding zones is power lines. So you don't want to be walking around in flood waters. You want to be out of that as much as possible. I say as much as possible. I just say entirely, right? Okay, so you want to keep enough drinking water stored for 3 to 6 litres per person per day for at least, I have there 2 weeks, but at least 3 weeks, okay? Because it's going to take some time for water to get back to being good again. So the more water you have, the better. If you're storing water in your garage, then storing it in glass is best, or the food grade plastic is also good. So thick plastic that won't leach contaminants. And then water can be stored for up to 12 months. So if you can label your plastic water bottles, that's really great as well. Put a date on it when it was filled. Okay, because you can't last more than 3 days without fresh drinking water. And so that's one of the first things that you need to really think about and store well. I also have on my counter bench top some of those ones, the drink containers that you use for parties. I just keep them on my countertop and I keep them filled up so that if we were to lose water in an instant, even if they're doing water works in the local area, then you've got clean drinking water on the go, and that's just a constant in our house, and the kids are used to that. Okay. Do we know when? I'm hesitant to save too much water in the next few weeks. Oh, when you're moving. Yeah, that's a tough one because, moving water is, I would just say store the water, and then when you need to move, if you don't need to take it with you, then just refill up when you get to the next place. But always have clean drinking water on hand because you never know when you're going to need it. The other thing that you can do is get a life straw. So a life straw or a portable drinking filter is always good too, because then if you do have contaminated water and you're drinking through that straw, it will keep 99% of bacteria out, but not viruses, just the bacteria. Okay, next thing, light. So having on hand or in your go bag torches, firelights or flints, and candles. So you need a variety of ways to actually have light or heat on hand, and don't just use one way like those gas clicker things. They're really great for instant flame, but then when they run out, you want a backup. If you're keeping lighters, they're going to be great until they run out, and then a flint is going to be your never fail option. Not always the easiest option. That's why you want to keep, your matches on hand as well. But learning how to use a flint is really essential, and not just keeping it, but practicing with it. Keeping candles on hand, so if your electricity goes out, that you've got some candles handy. Keeping torches is a must, and also headlamps. And of course, if you're going to keep torches, then you need a way to charge them up with your batteries, or wind up torches, or solar panel torches, all kinds of different ways to keep them charged. Okay, next one, food. So you really need to store your food for a good 3 to 6 months. You want a good food storage. If you get that under your belt and you're good at storing food, then try to extend it out to a year's supply of food. You want to line every space that you can under beds. You could, pick behind couches, somewhere that it's not easily viewed by visitors, but that you have plenty of food storage. And then when you store up enough food and variety, it's really handy to have if you are cooking and you're like, oh, run out of thing. You don't have to whiz to the shop and to come back again. You've got everything you need in your pantry, which is super, super cool. Okay, Michaela's put in a link to life straws, which is awesome. Thanks for that. Cool. So having not only your food storage and filling up your pantry with all the essentials, things that are long lasting, like your pasta, your rice, your oats, flour, sugar, honey, but also having things that are a no cooking option. So having already prepared meals that just need just add hot water to make a meal, so that in an emergency situation, you don't need to let the neighbors know that you're cooking a beautiful spaghetti bolognese, because if they smell it, they're going to come over to yours. And if they're not prepared, then you expect visitors. So making sure that you are prepared, and then know who in your circle of friends and family are also preppers, so that you can support each other, because you don't mind sharing a jar of spaghetti with someone else who can also trade with you some cheese, but to prop up a family who have not prepared at all, means that they might, you know, take your supplies that you have and leave you with nothing. So, you know, this is why we have these conversations, because the more people who are prepping and prepared, the better. So food that are high in energy, that have a long shelf life is excellent. So, but also be aware of food that takes up a lot of space. So if you've got a big stack of like CC, like Doritos, because you love Doritos, but a packet takes up a lot of space and you have limited amount of space to store food, then that's not going to be high on your priority list, because, you know, a pack of Doritos is going to be gone in 10 minutes and then you're still going to be hungry. Okay. So, but make sure that we do include babies and children and pets in our storage thinking, and also the essentials to keep families happy, some chocolate, you know, staples. I also think about things like milk powder. I know my kids don't prefer it, and I prefer almond milk as opposed to actual milk, but then come to a life-threatening situation, you know, we're all going to have to expand our palates. So think about those things as well. Next thing is clothing. So I love Michaela always reminds us that there is no wrong weather, it's only wrong clothing. And if you have the right kind of clothing, you are going to be well set up. So having clothes that are sturdy, so sturdy boots, gloves. I always, in all of my kits, I make sure my kids all have gloves, because in an emergency situation, you know, there's no luxuries. Your hands, your body is gonna go through all kinds of, you know, you might need to be touching things that are going to be not only gross but dangerous. So having a good pair of gloves is essential. Warm clothes, hats, tons of pairs of socks, insect repellent, making sure that you are using things and maybe that clothing that dries quickly, and natural fibers. I love the pair of pants that has zippers around the knees so that they can become instant shorts if I need instant shorts, because you just, you know, we know in summer in Australia it can get quite hot, but I'm predicting a lot of rain this season. If you take the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks and as an example, we've hardly seen the sun. So I'm predicting a lot of that, that our summer is going to be more like a English summer, or you know, closer to winter than a regular summer. We look at the last 2 summers we've had. Weird, right? Not usual. Okay, then keeping toiletries together. So making sure that you have your toilet paper on hand, lots of it. Hand sanitizer, I hate, right? But then in survival emergency situation, it might be handy to have a bit. Garbage bags, so one for disposing of waste and maybe for another one for medical waste. Disposable plastic gloves even you might need. But come to the toiletries, my essentials is making sure that you've got some moisturizer, something for your skin for protecting, lip balm, super important in emergency situations. I know if I go out in the climate, in whether it's windy or sunny and I'm out there in the elements, if I've not protected my lips, then I'm going to get a cold sore, and that's the last thing you want. So make sure that you are gearing up with little things that you might not think of, like your cold sore cream, of course, your first aid kit, which is a whole other section. Yeah, I keep a lot of natural alternatives to the chemist. I have a cream that's good for rashes and burns and all kinds of things. So, which is all natural and botanically based. I don't use anything with petroleum jelly or with anything with a mineral oil, because they are no good for your skin. There are certain times that you do want a petroleum jelly, and that's maybe if you've been burnt and you want to cover the skin to let no air next to it. Otherwise, you need to use creams that allow your skin to breathe. So there's certainly some things that are mineral oil based that I would never go anywhere near. And so have a look at what you're using that could be, you might think is good for you, but could be actually detrimental to you if it has a petroleum base to it. Okay. So feel free to ask any questions as we go. Okay, first aid kit does entitle its own section. So making sure that you have bandages and wraps in there, slings, things that can be used for multiple purposes. So like your like a scarf, you could use a scarf as a sling, as sun protection, as a tourniquet. I know one of the things that we want to do in this group is a first aid. First aid. Yeah, it does have an E actually on the end. Yeah, isn't it? So we do want to do a first aid course, which would be fantastic. I know someone put in the group recently where they did an online first aid course, which is super important. So while we're on this topic, I have, my son is type 1 diabetes, and that's something that I always need to keep topped up. So if you know a diabetic and you have those kinds of needs, and you know, that's really keeps us tethered to pharmaceuticals, where I like stay right away from pharmaceuticals and doctors ordinarily, but that's one area that I know that we need to keep in touch with those things. So keeping tweezers and scissors, those things handy is also super important. But also know how to use your first aid kit. So having one is great, and knowing how to use it, another subject. Okay, so I have already covered this. Medical supplies, cough medicine, colds medicine, stomach aches, like, pain relievers, vitamins. And there are a number of people within our group who are all extremely well trained on natural remedies. Betty made me a beautiful ginger and turmeric concentrate with all the good stuff in it for your immune system. So there's lots of good things that you can take that's natural based. In my everyday life, I work with a company who uses all natural remedies for nutrition, so I like to stick with the natural rather than the pharmaceuticals, like I mentioned. But sometimes when you're dealing with dysentery, sometimes there's some things that you just need in your first aid kit that's going to be helpful to you. Okay, can't rule out those things. All right, cash. So I keep seeing pop up in the chats how it's so important to keep cash and to use cash as much as possible, so that when we're moving away from getting out of the system, we're less able to be tracked as in terms of what you're doing when we are able to use cash. So unfortunately, they put us in a position where we need to shop online. I often use to get my survival gear is all these beautiful online places that Michaela Mids is actually putting into the group, and I do purchase a lot online. But also when you buy in bulk, and if you're in your local hubs, you get one person to purchase online in bulk, and then we all go through that person to pay cash for those items, and then that way they can't track who's buying what. Okay, so that might be an opportunity that you can have that conversation in your local hub groups. All right, so if you're in need of something, so say I'm buying a lot of honey, hey, I'm buying a bulk of honey, who wants to buy some honey, pay me cash in that, and then that's one way that we can not be using our credit cards as much. Okay, so, and then you want to keep smaller notes so that you're not having to trade and trying to get change, right? Okay. So, alrighty. Number 10. Keeping a crank wind up radio or a radio with spare batteries so that if you're in emergency situations that you can hear what's going on. Now, of course, you know, we're really well aware of what the media is trying to put out there, and starting to read between the lines, but knowing what they're talking about is super important. You know, maybe just even if you're in an emergency situation, being connected to the ABC if they want to talk about where emergency points are set up for thinking about flood situations or where power lines are down, you know, can be useful. But, you know, just hearing about what the establishment want to set up is, you know, good just to keep your ears out. So, you know, a lot of people, when I kind of mentioned this before, people are like, I don't want to listen to the radio, because it's especially ABC radio, because they are, you know, going to tell you one thing you don't want to. But I think it's good to be aware of the kinds of conversations that's going on, just to put it out there. Okay, and then to have a plan, emergency plan, so that you are able to talk with your family about, okay, if anything was to happen, emergency with a house, flood, fire, where would we meet? Okay, because if communications go down and you know, maybe you can't recharge your phone and you can't rely on your backup battery, you haven't got your solar panel set up that's recharging your phone, and that's another hint, solar for recharging items is fantastic. But if you haven't got those things set up, then you have a plan that you have created with your family, and it is a 3-step process. So one is, if the house is unsafe, we're meeting out the front of the house. If it's unsafe to meet out the front of the house, there is a designated spot down the road. It may be the cul-de-sac, it may be the park, but that's the spot that we're going to meet. If it's unsafe to meet because the local area is flooded, then there's a spot that's further, a couple of kilometers away. That's where we're going to meet. Maybe it's Auntie Joni's house. That's where we're going to go. Maybe if all of that is, okay, that's now not the no-go zone, then we've got the next spot out, and it is a friend who we've pre-designated that we're going to go to, and it is in the next couple of suburbs over. And it's really good to have set up those kind of zones so that where else could you go. And also having 5 contact people that you could possibly stay in overnight, right? So, if you've set up with your local hub and they're all flooded out, where else could you go that, you could turn to? Now, we've discussed in previous chats that your friends and family who you might have gone to in the last, 10, 20 years now no longer want to have anything to do with you. All right, so that's why we have these hubs set up, because I don't know Nath, but I know that Nath is somebody who is in this chat, and I'm going to get to know Nath because I know that if Nath needed someone who's out of Windsor that he could call on, then I could be there for him, or he could be there for me if I needed to get out of the hills area, because now it's unsafe for me living where I am. And Nath now knows that he needs to have his food storage, right? So he's a bit of a prepper, and we could connect because I'm going to bring my emergency. So I'm not coming maybe necessarily empty-handed, and we can connect because we have a few things in common. Okay, so starting to develop relationships with people that you can count on is super, super important. And that's why we do this on a regular basis. So because, first meeting, second meeting, okay, now what are we going to do? We're going to have coffee catch-ups. So we've met on Zoom. We're going to have a coffee catch-up. We're meeting in person. See, because I know Betty now, and I've met Betty a few times, and we're like best buds, right? But before these catch-ups, we didn't know each other, but we know Betty and I know each other. We've got quite a good community going now, and so these are what these hubs are all about. All right, what else? Your plan. You need to have everything in one place. So you really want a good backpack that you can pack all this stuff into. Not just, look, before I started doing all these preparations, I just had a normal backpack, and then I took it on a hike with me, and I lasted 30 minutes before I'm like, this is hopeless. I can't even fit in there what I want, let alone it's hurting my back. And so I went and invested in some really good backpacks from Mountain Warehouse, and it is superb now. I got one for every member of the family.
You got everyone there.
I do.
And
I'll send you the one.
So you might need to mute it unless you want to ask a question. Make sure that you've got important documents, and anything that's important to you. You might want to put it on a USB, so you've got a backup for those documents or any important photos. Make sure that they are packed as well, because I figured that sometimes some people are not going to come back to a home. You might need to escape for 3 days, and you might come back to your house, everything's there, but as we've seen from the fires and the floods, you might come back to nothing. And so be prepared for that. Okay, but if you have prepared and you do have a good food storage, have a few extra things that maybe you can give away, so that if people do come knocking on your door, that if you gave them a bag of rice, that's going to keep them happy, and then they are not going to have to stay on your doorstep or move into your home. You're like, guys, I got nothing, but I can spare you half a bag of rice. Would that help? That's how you kind of need to think about these prepping plans. What are you going to do if someone is coming to you and going, I'm hungry, I'm starving. You might feel bad about not being able to have them come stay with you, but if you can give them something because you've got a few bit extra that you can spare, then that might be a way of helping people out. So I've covered off a lot, but that's just to have you start thinking and going back over some of the other Zoom calls that we've done around. I've done a whole Zoom call around food storage. I've done a whole Zoom call around gardening, what you need to be planting, so that if you can't go to the shops, some things that you need to have in your garden. So all the different ways that we can start to prepare. Now, if you feel like that is completely overwhelming, completely like there is no way that I can get all of that stuff sorted out. Do you know there's a story of a woman who was completely poor. She was in the World War II in Germany, Nazi kind of like scenario, right? And so all she could do was buy 50-cent soap. And she just had this idea that, like, if I can afford to buy a little bit of soap each week, then that's all that I can afford. And so she bought this 50-cent soap, and she had quite a bit of soap stored up. And when it came time, there was like no food and nobody had anything. She had this soap. And what she would do is she would trade the soap for food. And that actually helped her get through the whole war where she had nothing else. She could trade this soap. And so, how inspiring is that you don't have to have everything, but if you have something, it might just keep you out of trouble and out of harm's way. So I'm going to press stop on the share there, and I'll open up for any questions. If anyone wants to unmute.
We don't know timing on any of this, do we?
Yeah, that's the biggest, question is like, if you had a timeline, then you could prepare, but it's not like a holiday where you could book it and then go, okay, well, but so that's why we need to start now and just do what you can now. I think the thing about the timeline is that John's saying, yes, we do have a timeline, is that I have seen posted like the plans, right? We working backwards, there's some things that we do know. So we do know that, okay, they've just brought in the new variant, okay, that you can give it a couple of weeks and then we will start to see we will start to see lockdowns. And already somebody has said that are they going to really let us out of on the 13th of December? Probably on the 15th of December, probably not. Probably that week that they will enforce more lockdowns. I hoped that we had till March to before we would start to see some of those camps being used in Queensland, because that's when they said that they would be open for use. But I think we can guarantee, like, we're not really going to get much of a run of freedom before we really have to put some of these things into play. So in terms of timing, yeah, just as soon as possible. Really start to think about, okay, if you had a flood, that could happen like within 3 days. You could be in quite a bad spot within 3 days, right? So you've got a few things that you need to be aware of when you're preparing for, and here's how I think about it. Long-term food storage. So that is something that you want to have, so that if you're in your home and locked down, then you've got your food storage. If you need to up and go and get out of there, you've got your 72-hour pack ready to go in a moment's notice. If you have a vehicle that maybe a caravan, that's great. You've got somewhere that you can take and you can go, and you're not stuck at home if you need to leave home. If you don't have that, maybe camping equipment, a tent will get you, through. But at the very worst, then you need to, I think of a getaway. So a car, a bike, and then foot. You might have to be on foot. Okay, so you need to have a few different plans. So plan to bunker down, plan to get up and go, plan to, go quickly if you need to. I hope that helps, and I know it can be a bit frightening if you're thinking about these things for the first time. Does anyone else have any other questions they want to ask? So I might throw a question out to all of you, and you can put it in the chat, or you can, and I might just say farewell to the people who are watching the recording, and I might press stop on the recording so that those that are in the room can actually now chat. And if you're watching the recording, do come on to our Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. We're here, and you can get to know all the people in your local area, because we do like to do breakout rooms, and you can get to know people. That's what it's really all about. Create your own local community so you feel safe should anything happen. And we have our 5K limit. You can share resources. All right, so I'm going to press stop on the recording.